So the UK appointed a very dynamic. Oh, sorry, you want me to do this? That better?
Yeah.
They appointed a very dynamic new chief scientist for the environment. His name's Bob Watson. You might well have heard of him. He led the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. He was chair of the IPCC. And he basically said that what we need to do is to have Millennium Assessment for the UK. That's what you've got here, this National Ecosystem Assessment. And from a series of random coincidences, he asked me to do the economics part of it, and that led to this new policy that the UK government has for the environment, which is basically trying to implement the ecosystem service approach. Now, through an equally random series of events, they decided while they were doing this that one of the problems was that there wasn't the capacity to really put this approach into reality, and they asked me to put together a network of people to facilitate that. Now, my first reaction to that was that I had no idea how to do that, so the first thing I did was get a lot of other people who know much more about this stuff than me as a mere economist. And so the team immediately expanded to include a lot of natural scientists and some really excellent social scientists as well. And we came up with this thing called the Valuing Nature Network, and defined its initial mission and initial objectives. And that mission really, as you can see, is quite simple. It's to try and engage across research disciplines. We've got natural scientists working with economists, working with social scientists, but also engage with decision makers, all in the same network, which is obviously what you need to implement the ecosystem service approach. We managed to get about £1 million sort of test bed funding from the UK research councils, just to see if this would work. And basically we were on a 2-year trial, and if we don't mess it up, then there is the promise that there will be a lot more funding following that. We thought that during that trial period we wouldn't be too adventurous, and in particular we thought we would focus initially on the getting the ecosystem service analysts working together, particularly the natural scientists, the economists and the social scientists all working together with decision makers embedded in the team, but probably not go the whole hog of engaging heavily with the private sector. That's what we want to do if we go into phase 2, which it does actually look like we will. So in this phase 1, the two major themes are trying to look at better valuation methods. We're not just looking at monetary here, we're looking at non-monetary as well. And also identifying and beginning to address knowledge gaps. How to do this? For me it was a very exciting and interesting challenge. How do you actually do this? How do you define what the agenda for a capacity building exercise would be? I really didn't know. I've never done this sort of stuff before. So it seemed to me that the first thing that you would want to do is engage with the analysts out there. And we thought it would be best to start off with everybody in their own comfort zones, not to launch in and try and get everybody to work with everybody else straight away, but rather to actually get people within their own communities talking about what were the issues and problems that they faced in trying to engage with the ecosystem service approach. So we had a big series of workshops, and you can see very diverse groups involved in this. A very explicit thing, I've always had a real problem actually with the idea of calling it ecosystem services, because actually I think that term turns off a large sector of the natural science community, in particular the geoscience people. They don't see it as anything to do with them, they see it as ecologists, and I know that's not technically correct, but that is the perception. And so we were very keen to get the geoscience community involved and if you like, the sort of abiotic community working with the biotic community. But also right the way through to like health, that sort of stuff. So that was great, that was really exciting and interesting, and then that led to a series of interdisciplinary workshops, where we thought we would play safe. We basically took people from those disciplinary workshops, and I have to admit, we thought, given that this is a trial period, we will take those people who are more open-minded, more happy about the idea of working outside their disciplines, and bring them together initially. Because if we can get this process working, then we hope it will accelerate. There was what social scientists call a town meeting, basically get all groups together and agree on a research agenda. Now what's happened very recently is that a call for research funding went out, and we basically asked for, we wanted to give away this roughly £1 million to research groups. So we got proposals in, and we're right now determining which grants we're going to award. End of this year, start of next year, there will be discussions to start this phase 2. A bit later than that, the awards that we've given out, people give their reports, and a new agenda will be agreed for further funding. A big conference, start of 2013, and and then announce what's going to happen in phase 2. Now, one of the early outputs of this has been a conceptual framework which we felt we did need for everybody to agree on prior to undertaking these research projects. It's not particularly radical. One thing it does emphasise is that if you're going to do valuation, and if anybody went to the previous plenary, there's no point you trying to look at total values, because we all know that the value of water supply is infinite. So instead we're looking at values associated with discrete changes, which can arise from a whole variety of drivers, policy drivers, socioeconomic drivers, environmental drivers, climate change, that sort of stuff. Those, of course, will feed in upon natural resources, and notice that we're not talking here about ecosystem services coming out of it. We're deliberately calling them environmental services, because that, we found, is a much more inclusionary term for the entire breadth of the natural sciences. These generate goods, generate values. Notice that we're not just interested in the traditional economic values, we're also interested in these sort of cultural shared values. And then these feed into the governance process. Go into evaluation assessment. Of course, although this is a really big box, it's only part of what happens in governance. I've just made it really big so otherwise you won't be able to see it. There's lots of other things happening in governance as well. And through that interaction, you get decisions. We're very interested in how those decisions are implemented. We're quite convinced that different implementation strategies will actually yield different uptakes, different real-world changes, and therefore different values. And it feeds back again. One of the themes, of course, is to not just look at flows, but to look at stocks, to recognise that humans put pressures on natural capital systems, and when it's within thresholds, everything looks fine. Indeed, you could actually ramp up pressures, and that's what we've done for the last 200 years. And as long as you're within thresholds, then you're actually looking at increasing flows and increasing values. But the problem, of course, is that eventually you reach a point where those pressures exceed thresholds, and you actually begin to reduce stocks and reduce flows, and values begin to decline. So, the research agenda to address those themes. There's two issues that have come out of it, and I should preface this by saying this is not an agenda that I've come up with, or that the other investigators have come up with. This is an agenda that has come out of that big series of workshops. Methodological issues coming out, empirical issues coming out. Very quickly going through those. For methodological issues, improving valuation, stocks and flows, scale, and then going from science to decisions. With each one of those, there's lots of sub-themes. So on the valuation theme, there's things like bringing in spatial variability, temporal and dynamic effects, that sort of problems, risks and uncertainties. Stocks and flows, what are the challenges of bringing stocks into the assessment? Something that relates very much to the previous talk, the plenary. How do we assess incremental effects to stop this sort of creep of multiple economic cost-benefit analysis, all of which look absolutely fine, but have a very deleterious cumulative effect. Scale is an issue that came out very strongly from a wide variety of natural science audiences. Is there a single correct scale? The overwhelming answer was no. There is no single correct scale. In that case, how do you make decisions given that problem? How do you tackle that issue? And finally, from science to decisions, how do we bring in these shared values, and how do we go from